Hello, Romantics. I'm Sarah Gomez, author, romance lover, and host. You're listening to Romancing the Story, a podcast centered around writing, reading, and story structure, all with a twist of romance. We're at episode 67, and on today's episode, I speak with romance author Courtney Deane about the impact of grief in creating a story, wanting someone to root for us, and how tragedy and humor go hand in hand. She released her debut novel, When Happily Ever After Fails, about rewriting tragedies into something beautiful, even when the world is crumbling around you. We chatted how writing about loss and revising a happily ever after doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing mentality, and mingling light and dark elements of life is more fact than fiction. We even delve a bit into her debut, taking over a decade to get published, and how the crux of the story never changed. Embracing where you are, even if it's terrible, to create your own version of a happily ever after. Links to connect to Courtney, find her book, as well as other media mentioned, will be listed in the episode description. I do use some Amazon affiliate links, so if you buy through the link, it helps the podcast and is always appreciated. Quick personal note, I know it's been a while since I've posted, and I will be posting kind of more information if you're curious about what my schedule will look like going forward and what you can expect more of in the podcast and even why I was gone for a little bit. You can find all that information in my social media at Romance the Story. With that said, let's jump right in. Welcome, romance author Courtney Deane. Yay!
Hello. Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
So, in case listeners don't know, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your writing?
So my background actually is in writing. My full-time day job is writing. I'm a full-time freelance writer, have a variety of print, online, broadcast clients, and then I do some private PR and marketing on the side as well. And have a tiny bit of a tragic background, kind of an oxymoron, just a tiny bit of a tragic background. My dad passed away from ALS when I was 14, and my mom passed away from really not coping well with that and some unhealthy lifestyle habits when I was just about to turn 28. So the inspiration from this book came from the desire to take these tragedies and this negativity and not necessarily turn it around. There's kind of no turning around that your parents aren't here anymore, but at least make something positive and good out of it. So that led me to start writing this book.
I'm sorry that it came from such a grief, a place of grief, but it was such a great book. And then I could feel a lot of personal connections in there. Did it start out like that?
It did. I don't not believe in therapy. I would certainly never espouse that to other people struggling. It hasn't necessarily been the right outlet for me. So I turned to the one medium that has kind of always been there and always made me happy, which was writing. And, it was successful in a therapeutic way in that it let me get out a lot of thoughts, feelings, emotions, not just surrounding the deaths, but how life operates after those deaths and how to navigate that as now a young adult without kind of that safety net. And in addition to that, how almost like a blueprint for others who don't necessarily have that experience, but have to deal with those of us who are grieving. I think everybody is doing their best. Most people do not have ill will, but some of the responses and way people handle this actually make the situation worse. So I did want to get in some of my sentiments in that. And so I kind of pushed all of my emotional baggage on poor Abigail, my protagonist.
Some of the insights you had in there, I figured there might be some personal connection there because, like you mentioned, it was so direct and so true to when you say somebody, if you tell somebody that, or someone knows that a parent passed away or someone very close to you passed away, sometimes what they say can be a little strange or feel not received well. Let's put it that way, right?
It's true. Yes. I have kind of two examples that I share from time to time that people kind of just jaw drops. One was when I was at my mom's funeral, still relatively shell shocked. I had to give the eulogy. I shouldn't say I had to, like I was forced out up there, but I did give the eulogy. And one of my distant relatives came up to me, said nothing else, just said, "I remember your dad's funeral." And I nodded quietly, straight face like that. And it was like, I don't, me too. What do you do with that?
Yeah.
And
How do you
the other
respond?
instance, I had a Tinder date that was going very, very well. And, you know, as happens in light conversation, he asked, "What do your parents do?" And, you know, it's, to be fair, it is a landmine question. I just said, you know, they're not here anymore. And his response was, "Oop, landmine, back up, never mind." And we dated for a couple months, never asked about him ever again. And I thought, do I bring them up? How do we have this meaningful relationship when he won't navigate or even is curious to ask about this subject that's obviously had such an impact on me? So I'm hoping. Nobody's perfect. I get that. I'm not saying I grieve perfectly or provide empathy perfectly, but maybe just a step back and a think about what you say to people would be really nice. And I hope I provide a little insight into that through the novel.
Yes, and I felt like I was kind of navigating that with the protagonist a little bit, like hearing it on the other side, knowing what she had gone through. So it is
Right.
incredibly insightful in that regard. Speaking of which, you just released your debut romance, When Happily Ever After Fails. Congrats.
Yes. Thank
Yay.
you. Thank you. This day has been a long time coming. And at the same time, once it got close, it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. But I am very excited, and it's been a lot of heartache and blood, sweat, and tears. And I've even had a couple people, I feel like I'm torn. I feel like I have two full-time jobs now, and a 2.5-year-old toddler, and a family, and a needy dog. And, I've had a couple of people say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it's so stressful right now." And I always say, don't apologize. Like, don't say sorry to me. I'm pursuing my dream. Not a lot of people get to do that. So is it hard? Yes. Do I have an immense amount of mom guilt and dog mom guilt? Yes. But nobody should look at my life and say, "Oh, poor her. She's doing exactly what she wanted to do." It's just those things come with sacrifice. And that's the phase we're in right now.
Right, right. And it seems like this kind of happened in a I think in a seems like it happened in a good way, right? Like there's a lot of things coming, like you have a like debut author, right in the I think this is a good time for these kind of conversations that you have. Like there's a lot of nuance there to
Thanks.
be had. And then like, yeah, in the romance, right now the romance genre is just blooming with so much like nuance and how we talk about things. So I feel like this is a great book for like right now.
Thank you.
And
I agree. And, I started this back in 2010 and obviously had other life events that got in the way and maybe wasn't as disciplined as I could have been. And, since that time, the genre has fallen in and out of favor. And in the back of my mind, it always kind of was like, is this going to be a favorite genre when this releases? Are people going to care to read a rom-com or a romance? So I'm very, very thankful that the timing worked out on that, as you said.
I find myself gravitating a lot more to those types of books actually. So I feel like yes, it's just such a great time for to have, it's a good problem to have, right? All the
Yes,
things
I
going
think
on.
it was serendipitous that the stars aligned on this one.
In the book, the protagonist, Abigail, her life is kind of a comedy of errors, I'd call it, like was sprinkled
Yes.
with grief and joy, which can both be heavy and funny at times. Like, yes, we're talking about grief, but yes, it is a rom-com. So we can have both.
Yeah,
So why do you feel it was
I think
important to
so.
write about? Yeah, I feel like that. I feel absolutely we can do that. So why do you feel it's important to write about grief, evolving goals, and when happily ever after fails?
Right. Well, I think it's important because that is life. And, to really embrace the good and the accomplishments and the positive, we kind of need to know the downside of that. There is no light without dark. If we don't have kind of the yang to the yin, we really kind of can't embrace the fruitfulness of our wins. And I wanted this book to be relatively realistic. And again, the things that happened to her in terms of her parents did happen to me. So it may not happen to everybody, but that can be realistic. I just felt like on top of that, her wins would be so much sweeter if she was able to navigate these bumps and bruises. And, it is interesting. I did have a literary agent early on in the process who was excited about the book, said they loved the book. Their feedback was, I don't know how to market this because there's so much happiness and funniness and humor, and there's so much sadness and tragedy. And so she said it kept her up at night, but she ultimately had to pass because she didn't know how this was going to fit into genres in the grand scheme of things. And I thought that that was very valuable feedback. And I am not saying that she is incorrect, but that's life. That's life. It's got grief and joy and happiness and loss and resentment and fulfillment and failures. So I did not feel that I wanted to take an all or nothing approach and make it either a slap happy, just feel good comedy, or take it another direction and just make it a dark novel. That just, to me, wasn't true to this story. It's both. It's going to stay both. And the audience can decide. And if this is not what people want, I'm okay with that because I feel very good in the fact that I put my best foot forward. I took long enough and made sure that this was the novel I wanted. Are there things I learned along the way that with the next one I will do differently? Absolutely. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I feel like I left it all out on the table, and hopefully it resonates with people.
Yeah, I feel like, you know what, you sometimes you're in the mood for like a very slap happy kind of rom-com, but then there are other times where you want one that's a little more reserved, where when comedy hits, it's there, but you do have those moments of like levels, right? The levity here,
Right.
so
I say it's a layered
yeah,
novel.
there you go.
It's a bit of an onion. Hopefully people like onions.
Well, and that's, I think, one of the things I found very endearing, both about the book and the main protagonist, was her perseverance. Like, even though she was kind of had all these downers, we kind of start with a little bit of a downer in kind of the beginning when we first meet her, but she keeps going and pursuing her goals even in the midst of all these setbacks. So, like,
Right.
relatable. So
yeah, I mean, the other option is lay down and die,
Right?
and that would not make a good book in my opinion. If they just found her on her doorstep, I quit, I give up, I'm just going to disintegrate into the stairs at this point. So no, she gosh darn it, she wants that happy ending. She wants it for herself, she wants it for everybody. Does that blind her to certain realities of the world? Yes. Does that get in her way? Does she get in her own way? Absolutely, all of it 100% true, but I think you have to admire her effort. And for the record, she is absolutely more optimistic than I am. And I think you have to kind of love her for it. You can see the foibles coming. You can see where maybe she's misdirected. But you hope it works out for her anyway, and vicariously for the other characters that she's trying so hard to give them their happily ever afters as well.
I think that's what I found like really endearing as also the perseverance factor, but then also the optimism on top of that. Cause she just kind of like, I can do this. And like, she just goes for it. And I'm just like, I love that attitude. I mean, why not? Why can't we all be a little bit like that or kind of embody that sometimes? And sometimes we do, sometimes not so much. We could, but I love that about her.
Thank you. Yeah, she has got those rose-colored glasses on, at least when it comes to everybody else. And she wants to put them on when it comes to herself. She just hopes tragedy doesn't keep following her as it seems to in the beginning.
Right. And then it is an important piece to weave into kind of that story. I think it especially for your story, how she's kind of starting, it's part of her character arc. But then also, I think just in general, for a lot of stories, that is an important piece to include, is part of that perseverance in order to, I would hope, would want to change by the end of the story.
I think so. And, it's a good question to think, does she want to change, or is she kind of forced to change by maybe taking the rose-colored glasses off, or maybe taking them down a little bit and seeing that maybe everything isn't possible for everybody? It's an interesting kind of theory you just posed. I'll have to think about. I did have one developmental editor early on say, well, her toxic trait, she has toxic positivity. And I thought, no, she doesn't. Maybe I took it personally because I felt offensive, but I thought, no, I don't see her positivity as toxic. I see her as an eternal optimist, and I see her as somebody who can't get out of her own way, and who maybe needs to not meddle so much in other people's lives as she pursues these happily ever afters. But I thought about it and I thought, no, I don't personally agree with that toxic positivity is her trait.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so either, to be honest. Like, I feel like she's trying to uplift like other people around her, but not in an invasive or forceful way,
Well,
right?
sometimes.
Well, a little, but like to a certain degree, right? She knows her boundaries. I will respect that. So,
Right.
uh, in the book, you weave an impactful story where Abigail learns to embrace her mess, and man, don't we all? Don't we all need kind
Oh
of
my
do
gosh.
that?
Right.
So I recently was actually talking to my kiddo about that. She was like mentioning, I'm not normal. And I'm just like, girl, normal's relative, right? We're all a bit of a mess. So I think most of us are in the throes of embracing our own messes, really. When embracing a mess, what does that look like for characters?
I thought that was an interesting question because I don't necessarily know that Abigail does embrace her mess. I think a little bit with that eternal optimism, I think she's a little bit in denial that it's as bad
Oh.
as it maybe seems. And I think that while she's accepted the bad things that have happened to her by virtue of the fact that she keeps trying to find the positivity, I wouldn't actually say that she has
Hmm.
embraced the mess.
Like going about the perseverance was more based on the trying to better her life, better her situation, better the
I think
circumstances.
so. Yes,
Okay.
yes, I think
Oh,
so.
okay.
I think it is, I am going to get this happy ending if it kills me. And I think she is very, very driven. Yeah, I think and I should say that's not to say that she doesn't know her life is messy. She does. She knows that she's in some debt. She knows that she does not necessarily want this new position that was afforded to her, and a couple other spoilers that I don't want to reveal now. I think she's aware of them, but I think her mentality is more, how can I change these versus embrace them.
Absolutely. And kind of like kind of embrace like where she is and trying to
I think she absolutely does. I do think that there's a turning point where she does kind of finally stop fighting everything and just embrace where she's at. It doesn't come easy, but I do think she definitely does do that.
I love the trajectory that she kind of took with this kind of like you said, this eternal optimism. And then she kind of just kind of there was a realism where she kind of figured this out, but then she was still optimistic, even in the midst of it. She was still
Right.
optimistic. So sometimes when you see characters change with the realism, it kind of brings it down a little bit. But I
Mhm.
really like that you kept the character still true to her own nature of the optimism and perseverance.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think there's definitely a moment where you can see her slowly starting to embrace her situation. And I do think that there's another moment where you almost see her metaphorically sigh and just let it go and just say to herself, this is what it is. I cannot change this moment. I cannot change my literal right now current situation. I'm just going to have to roll with it. And I think it's a big redemption moment for her, even though it may not be the biggest yell it from the hilltops moment. I think that there certainly is one where she kind of goes, okay, this is life. It's not going to be perfect for me right now. I can do this. I'm okay with that. And I think a lot of those lessons come from the people that she interacts with, and the people who she does try to turn it around for.
Mm. Did you think that was important to add that moment, especially since the happily like for like her happily ever after in order for her to find that?
I did. I
Mm.
think there had to be a moment of clarity for her that no matter how hard you try, some of these happily ever afters may not work out, or they may not work out the way you want them to. And thus the title, When Happily Ever After Fails. Its origin, it's taken from a John Henley lyric from The End of the Innocents. His lyric is, but happily ever after fails. And I morphed it into when, because not to be a pessimist, but I do think for all of us, our versions of happily ever after will fail at some point. The white knight is not coming. The marriage doesn't look the way you thought it would. Kids don't come easy. you're not living in the penthouse, whatever it is. I think we are all going to battle some obstacles, and we should recognize and understand that these goals and our happily ever after will very, very likely falter, but that doesn't mean that we can't alter our course. It doesn't mean we can't keep trying and ultimately get there.
Talk about one of those, because you hit on a great point. One way which I related to the main character, Abigail, is creating your own opportunities. There's something to be said about being creative, right? Both in a cathartic sense and a logical way, which Abigail displays throughout the story. What strategies did Abigail use at her disposal to revise her own happily ever after? Because like you said, happily ever after can look different.
Right. I do think that she had a couple strategies. I always think opportunity is a mixture of saying yes to what's presented to you, which she did actually fight against, and utilizing your inherent talents, which again, she also did fight against. But even though she kind of fought that path, I do think that she used those two things, and therefore opportunities again came in a way that she wasn't expecting, and a happily ever after came in a totally surprising form for her. And I should mention that this novel does not, it is absolutely a rom-com, but I really wanted the ending to be unique and for her. So it maybe is not the traditional ending everybody is looking for, but it's the ending that the book deserved. And I don't think I'm revealing any spoilers by saying that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm trying to avoid any spoilers as well. So because I feel like, I feel like readers should really just dive into the book themselves, because then like it is chock full, like you said, of like it's a lot of rom-com energy. There is some talk about grief and things like that, but it's never. You do a great balancing act. I was very, very thankful of that, because sometimes talking about grief can get very heavy, but like you were able to really kind of measure it out really well. And I appreciate that as a reader. So
well, I appreciate hearing that as a writer. And I won't say that I knocked it out of the park on the first, 10,032 drafts, but I got very lucky. I had a great critique group during COVID. I hired a great developmental editor. And I think that the story that emerged, I hope, is a really good balance of the two, that, laugh, cry, just root for her. And I think that's all anybody wants, is just say you root for me. Like that's, you can't solve my problems. You cannot hand me a happily ever after. Just say you root for me. And if you can't help me, certainly don't hurt me. And I think that is kind of an attitude that Abigail embraces, even if she doesn't necessarily vocalize that.
That was something very admirable about her character I liked. And when you say too that you were kind of like working through like several of the drafts, maybe a bit, did it look very different? Did what you had in mind kind of differ from what is the final version?
The crux of the story is the same. It always has been the same. For the most part, how she got there is true to the original version. I really, bad on me. Being a professional writer, I felt pretty confident that I could write fiction. Why would I not? I get paid to write all day, every day for like a decade plus now. And I hate to say I was cocky, but I just was ignorant. And the beginning really was rough for me to get to grab the audience's attention right away. So we ended up moving the story up, and I went through quite a few iterations of the beginning. And then there were a couple scenes that, there's pretty writing and there's compelling writing. And I think I fell a little bit into like, waxing poetic and isn't this beautiful? And my critique group was like, yawn, hate it. In a good way. I'd love you back. So we changed a couple of those. One being kind of the inspiration for the crux of the book, which is that she wants to rewrite tragic endings. How she got there went through a couple different revisions because they thought it was a little too soft and too Pollyanna-ish. So yeah, that's probably the biggest plot point that changed. Everything else, the story's pretty true to day one.
Oh, that's good then. Like, cause that's that's always, it's always interesting talking to, especially debut authors and like seeing how much that story actually evolved. And especially since you have a background as a professional writer, like it's always, since you
It
say it's
helped
like
me and it
different,
hurt me.
I could see that pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
Were
Yeah,
you, what
definitely.
was your biggest challenge in that? Was it like editing your own work? Was it kind of just like writing
It was that
longer?
beginning. 100%. It was
Beginning.
that beginning. I had a very quiet beginning. And I think I was trying to kind of word vomit information on who she was, what her problem is, the background on the parents. I had so many flashbacks in there. Oh my God. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had so much story set up that it just kind of didn't get off the ground for a little while. So we moved the story up quite a bit and just slam bang put her right into problem number one. You need a job. Here's a job available. It's not what you thought. Do you want it? So that's kind of now our slam bang beginning. You know, if I could throw her off a cliff and she could parachute and shoot the bad guy, I would. But that is generally frowned upon in the rom com genre. So we did the best we could with a dynamic beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that we were kind of thrown right into the action. There wasn't a whole lot like we got enough build up, but then we didn't have to wait too long.
Right. Oh gosh, I hope so. That that plagued me for sure.
Oh, so so I'm kind of curious with your writing process, like how long would you say it took for like maybe like writing the book? Like you said
I
you started
mean,
in 2010, right? Is that right?
I did. I started in
Uh,
2010
wow.
and I got, the sad thing is I got probably 75-80% of the way done by 2014. And, I was moving cities. In my defense, I was living on the Las Vegas Strip. So to say I was distracted is maybe an understatement. Yes, it was even more fun than it sounds. I was dating, then I met my husband, then we went through some fertility struggles, then we had the baby. And so I just kind of let life get in the way. And it's not that I wasn't writing, obviously, I was still writing day to day all the time. But I do regret that I didn't make this more of a priority and push it out there sooner. But again, as you said, I think things happen for a reason. And, rom-coms and romances are in favor right now. And hopefully that means the timing was right on this.
That's awesome that you had kept it alive that long and that you were
I was
able to
not
publish
going to
it.
let it die.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll
thank
tell you,
goodness.
I do have Abigail's perseverance. There was not one minuscule part of me that was like, I'll just shelve this. That's okay. It doesn't need to see the light of day. No, this was always going to come to fruition. If I had to self-publish it, if I had to print it at Kinko's and leave it on people's doorsteps like a traditional old school like phone book, it was going to see the light of day. So I always knew that. Did I know, again, happily ever after, did I know how it was going to come into the world? What publishing path was going to materialize? I had no idea. I just knew one way or the other I was going to put this out there in the hopes that, again, I can make people laugh, cry, maybe educate them a little bit on the grief process. And I do want to add, obviously rom-com in this type of book, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I certainly hope that it reaches the people who do, for one reason or another, feel that the world has just been so unfair to them. And like, why can't it pick on somebody else for once? And like, why am I the only one that the hits keep coming to? Um, I know myself, like I've taken great solace in the podcast, Terrible Thanks for Asking. It's like based around that here's a person, they've had hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and here's their story. And it's not that you it's not that you want to revel in other people's tragedies, but it's just like, God, I'm not the only one. And there really is some solace and some comfort in that. And so that's, I wrote the book for myself. I wrote it for entertainment, but I also wrote it for that cohort of people that the best way I always describe it is, those of us who we feel alone in a crowded room and everybody else is, as you say, normal and have normal problems. And we're out here with our perpetual rain cloud over our head. Like that's cool. So yeah, I don't even remember where we started with that. I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's who I wrote it for.
No, I think that is a lovely kind of way to put it. Because I always think of the phrase like, when things get really bad, you either laugh or you cry. So
Oh, so
like,
true.
and yeah, and I feel the same way. Like to me, that's kind of how I'm an eternal optimist myself. So that's
Hmm.
why I felt so, you know, a connection with this character. Cause I was just like, you know what? I probably would do the same. Like I would probably crack jokes or I would try to think of it in it would be a little bit of a downer, but I would kind of bounce back up and kind of keep going. It's one of those things I think that, it's just depressing if you think about too much, but there is a bit of like a connection when someone else is going through that too. And you kind of just laugh about it. So,
Right, right. And obviously there is a time and a place. I don't advocate, hey, if somebody's down, to make them feel better, make light of their situation.
right.
Read the room, read the grief,
Exactly.
read the journey. But certainly I think after some time has passed, and if you're a dark humor person, which like I absolutely am, there can be a time and place for that. And again, there's also a time and place to just cry and be like, this is so effing unfair. Like, why does everybody else seem to skate through life? And like, I just can't catch a break here. And it's like, whether that's really true or not, if it feels true to you, then I mean, that's the truth you're living in. And so, I don't think there's a timeline on grief or getting over things, but I am a big advocate of, if you need to cry, cry. If you need to have a down day and just say, I hate this, the world is so unfair, have it. But don't, in my opinion, don't wallow and don't brood. Make sure that after kind of all of that is out, or at least out for the time being, pick yourself back up, um, you know, dust yourself off, and get to work doing what you need to do to get yourself out of that funk or to turn your situation around. I'm a humongous fan of action. There are very few things in this life that we cannot control by taking action. And that does not mean we can maybe turn a circumstance around. We can't cure somebody's cancer because we're taking action, but looking into referrals, asking college roommates who are doctors, who they would, recommend, looking into treatments, looking for support groups, take some form of action. I promise you, it will make you feel better, and it will give you at least a modicum of control back over the uncontrollable. Because man, you can certainly spiral when you feel like there is no control and you're just simply a victim of circumstance.
Right. Right. And I feel there is, like you said, kind of there is a piece of like catharsis, kind of putting your energy elsewhere and focusing on like a
Right.
goal in mind.
Or, if all else fails, write a novel about it.
There you go. Yeah, write out
Still,
write out your feelings, feel your feelings and write them out.
yeah.
So, um, and kind of speaking of which, like, was there any instance either taken from the real life or part of the writing process, where you said to yourself, like, I have to include this in the novel for either the characters or like something like you kind of mentioned, like people saying those things, like kind of off cuff things, like during really grieving situations? Were there other instances where or something you really want to pinpoint that you're like, I really wanted to include that in the novel, period, point blank?
it it really just was my thoughts, feelings, and sentiment surrounding these two deaths, and how you kind of navigate them both on your own and with other people, whether that's other people or people you don't. And so there is a scene in the book that is obviously not modeled after that Tinder date weirdo, but there is a scene where she has a love interest and he seems to have this perfect family, and she just doesn't. I mean, when's the right time to tell somebody, well, my life doesn't look like that, and am I going to ruin heavy am I going to ruin a really good moment by making it too heavy? Is he even going to want to be with me if he's not used to these kind of challenges and setbacks that are my life? And these can honestly be kind of real world questions. I know it's at least been true for me. It's odd to see like happy families. On the one hand, you're so happy for them and appreciative that it does exist, and on the other hand, you're like, why is this like the opposite of what I had? Like, why this is just so unfair?
I'm glad you included that. I think that's, those pieces are important because especially from someone like in the outside looking in who might not have had that similar experience, those are things you don't think about, right? Like someone
Right,
who doesn't
right.
know that situation.
I think a lot of people can take things that seem to easily come for granted that,
Mhm.
well, of course your two parents are going to meet your grandchildren. Of course your children. Of course you're going to be able to have children. Of course you're going to get married. Of course you're going to buy that house because that's the life they've lived and their siblings have lived and their parents have lived, and it's just the natural course of things, and it's not them being entitled, and it's not even necessarily them being ignorant. It's just, your reality. And then there's people like me that see how easily these things can be taken for granted, and they're not givens and they are not guarantees.
Right. And it kind of gives you like it was talking about, like kind of that insight and can that other seeing from that other perspective of how that
Yeah,
could be from someone. So, you know
yeah.
what I really enjoyed too, the reading about characters who have like obstacles solely outside of relationship driven. Like I thought that was very, very interesting for me, especially. Like, I kind of like those external pieces of conflict, so that it kind of moves and evolves the character. So I know you have a lot of things going on in your book in particular, where Abigail's kind of trying to live up to a legacy. She's worried about job stability and kind of managing her own personal life, all of which seem to be
Hmm.
going, like I said, south in the beginning. Um, how
Right.
do you think focusing on those pieces of the protagonist's life helped her control the narrative and shape the story?
So I thought this was an interesting question. I My very literal answer is that she did not necessarily get to control the narrative because there was an outside entity, namely me, who did control the narrative. And I think that while she embraced some challenges and ultimately it gave her some of the happiness and fulfillment which she was looking for, I don't know that those bumps and bruises necessarily helped her to control the narrative. I think they helped her get where she needed to, even though at times she kind of went kicking and screaming.
Mm. So, but it helped shape, but would you say it would help shape
Oh
her
gosh.
as a character?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. It did, and I think that there is certainly some success to be seen in the fact that she took a lot of hits in this novel and she faltered, but she did navigate those challenges without her parents, and there was a lot thrown at her. And she, not to say she was a one woman show, she had help here and there, but she did persevere, and I think kind of proved to herself that even though the situation is not ideal and there's nothing she can do to change it, she can get where she wants to go. She is capable on her own.
Yeah, and actually that's something actually now that you mention it, I didn't even think about that she navigated it even though she mentioned throughout the entire story that, her parents are gone and that, she's kind of going it at her own. Yeah, at no point does she get the opportunity to like talk with her parents or, try to navigate it with their help. So,
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's that death is a finality. There's no going
yeah.
back in that. And believe me, this novel is bittersweet. I've thought about it and thought, you know, would I obviously take all of this back and just not be an author if I could bring them back? 100% I would. 100% I would.
Mm,
It's not an ending that I can conjure up, unfortunately. And, as much as I can experience commercial success, we hope, with this book, it'll never be a true happy ending. They're not here to see it. So, you don't let it totally rain on your parade, but it is a fact of life,
right.
and I think that that's true for Abigail too.
Mm, mhm. But in the meantime, you can kind of make, like you said, your own happily ever after. It can evolve, right? And look just a little different. So,
Definitely. Yes. Yes. I agree with that.
so I know we have talked so much about your incredible book, learned a lot about you as an author and kind of what made this story the story it is. So, where can listeners find your book and how can they connect with you?
Sure. So the book will be available essentially everywhere online if you're looking to have it delivered or ebook format. You can find it in stores in select indie bookstores and Barnes and Nobles in both Southern California, Las Vegas area, and Philadelphia. The book is set in Philly, and the city has been very, very welcoming of that setting. And then who knows? I'm hoping this will be one of those cool things to where I'm walking through a bookstore in Paducah, Kentucky, and boom, there it is. I have to ask my sales reps about that though. But yeah, you can definitely find it kind of wherever books are sold online and in those stores. Gosh, you can connect with me TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Substack, YouTube, and at CourtneyDeane.com. I will warn you, most of my social media is general jackassery mixed with a little heart. But, I'm doing my best and embracing it. And I should mention, I do have a book signing at the Barnes & Noble in Glendora, California, which is kind of near Pasadena, San Gabriel area, on April 13th from 1 to 3. And I have another one in Henderson, Nevada, which is right outside Vegas, on April 20th.
Thanks so much to Courtney for joining the show. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe where you listen to podcasts. That way, you're the first to hear new episodes when they drop. And if you get a chance, feel free to leave a review. It helps support the show and allows more opportunity to bring in all kinds of fantastic guests. There's also a link to the YouTube channel in the description if you'd like to see the interviews with some of the guests and see them show off their lovely books. As always, stay safe, be well, and keep writing. Bye!